There are certain landscapes and there are certain moments and certain situations of light and season when minimal photography is the best way that you can go for in that location for that given situation. And when I'm thinking about minimal photography, I think of Michael Kenna. Michael Kenna is a British photographer and it's one of my favorite photographers when it comes to minimal photography. He shoots only in black and white, he shoots film, and I think we all have something to learn from his photos. I've selected a few photos by Michael Kenna and I will tell you what I learned from it. These 6 tips, these 6 suggestions can be found in any of these photos. Any of these photos contain all those 6 tips. So let's start and look at some photos and talk about some tips that you can use in your minimal photography. The first tip that I want to give you is to keep it simple. Now, if you thought that you are creating simple compositions, well, think again. Just take a look at the photos of Michael Kenna and you will see the simple elements used in his compositions. Take a look at this photo, for example, where you have the pure white of the snow and a simple fence that goes in a diagonal shape and strikes a photo from the bottom left corner to the upper right part. It's one of the rare occasions when I see a photo completely divided by a diagonal and still working. And I think that it's working because it has negative space on both sides and there is none element that will attract your eye on neither of these 2 sides. Another photo where simplicity is the game, where you see a simple zigzag if you want. You go from here to here, and then you have a horizontal line over here. Again, it's the use of negative space and just a simple fence. Now, this is a famous tree that Michael Kenna shot in Japan, and it's like a truly black and white image. It's very it has very light gray tones over here, but the main image is about this patch of snow and this tree that goes in this strange shape. If the photo it's about this tree, then this is the element that should stay in this photo. And as you can see, many of these photos are done during winter. It's perfect to do minimal photography. And another one, a simple horizontal line, and you can see this entire element, it's almost in the middle and it doesn't hurt the eye. As long as you have negative space over here and over here that it's similar, and none of these 2 areas have other elements that will interfere with your attention, then I think symmetry goes very well. Approach for basically the same situation. You have some trees over here and you also have some trees over here, but you have a different approach, and it's a completely different way of thinking. Now, tip number 2 would be to use negative space. As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, any of these tips can be applied to any of these photos. As you can see, there's a lot of negative space in his photos, as you already saw. For example, here, where you have the mountain sticking out from the fog, and you have this entire fog over here. And many of these photos fall into a quote from Michael Kenna, where he said that he's not interested in presenting the world as we see it, because we see it like this every time, every day. He's interested in creating mystery and creating something that it's not necessarily visible for the naked eye. This is, for example, presented in this photo, where you have tip number 3, create a mysterious appearance if you want. This is the rise of a full moon captured in a really long exposure, and you see this trajectory on the sky and you're kind of wondering what it is. Of course, the title gives it away. Another image that shows not only why it's mysterious, because you don't necessarily know what is this building, but what I think it's great about this image is because he uses these ice flowers in the foreground. It gives you a suggestion of the temperature, how cold it was, the season, it's winter. And by doing this, you get a really interesting suggestion of another layer in this photo. Another photo that falls into the category of mysteries. Of course, you know these are boats, but you don't necessarily know exactly what is happening over here. This is a combination between the natural world and the industrial world. Michael Kenna photographs a lot these industrial buildings, and in this situation, it's almost like a story about a utopia. It's something like this is the last remains of nature, because it looks like a wreck or a ruin, and in the back there is in smog and in fog and in mist the towers of this industrial building. And again, a simple approach to these layers of mountains that are stretching far away. It kind of makes you think what is beyond this. It's a simple approach, but an effective one. Now, tip number 4 would be to think different. Cartier-Bresson said, a good photo is always on the edge of good or a total disaster. And having the courage to place the subject over here, this kind of composition, this type of placement of the subject, I think you have to think completely different in order to come up with something like this. Here's another example of thinking different, where you have a simple tree line that goes up and you're capturing it in a square format, or some birds sitting on some elements over here. Tip number 5 would be to think about your elements as a way of creating a perfect geometry. As you can see over here, this photo is perfectly aligned with the train rails that are going exactly between these two buildings. And again, a simple geometry shape that will guide your eye towards this point over here. It's the simplicity of this image. It's his decision not to include any other element that makes this photo a really great one. This photo can be also about the mystery, but it's also about creating a perfect geometry with this industrial furnace and this smog or fog. Now, how many times you have said to yourself, damn those wires, damn those telephone wires that are sticking in front of my photo? Well, here's an example of how Michael Kenna took advantage of that and incorporated it in a photo. Now, the last tip that I have, the tip number 6, is to see and understand how Michael Kenna uses the areas of light and darkness, and to understand that the alternation of these areas can create interesting compositions. For example, in this photo over here, you have light, then you have darkness, then you have light, then you have darkness again, and then the photo kind of loses itself. Again, the same way of thinking, where you have an area of light, then an area of darkness, and then again an area of light. Again, this photo can be also seen as a mystery because you don't know what it's here. Again, it can be seen as a construction of a perfect geometry, because this is exactly what it is, or a simple composition with a really long exposure. You have this area of darkness, light, darkness, darkness, and light, and you have this patch of light leading the eye towards these peaks over here. And the last photo, where you have the smoke coming from this furnace being lit by the industrial light behind it and being captured in a really long exposure. But these elements are so visible because you have this area of darkness over here and the complete darkness in the negative space over here. Okay, that's it for today, and I hope that you have learned something by just looking at the photos of a great photographer, Michael Kenna. If you have something to say, just use the comment section below. If you're here for the first time, please consider subscribing. If you are subscribed already, please go on my channel and check the bell that will notify you no matter what when I do a new upload. And until next time, keep on photographing is the only way that you can get better. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.